You've probably heard this idea floating around, right? That you can tell someone's politics just by looking at a scan of their brain. It's this wild idea that our deepest beliefs, whether we lean left or right, are literally hardwired into us. Well, today we're going to dig into that and figure out what's real science and what's just a really good story.
This is the big question, the one that's launched 1,000 headlines and a whole field of study called neuropolitics. But is there actually anything to it? Or is it just a catchy idea that feels good in a world that seems so divided? Let's find out.
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to rewind the clock a bit. See, this whole idea didn't just pop up out of thin air. It all kicked off with one single, super influential study that, honestly, got everybody talking.
All right, so the story kicks off back in 2011. A study by a researcher named Kanai and his team came out with a claim that just blew up. But, science never stops at just one study. Over the next few years, other scientists tried to see if they could find the same thing, and the results were kind of messy, all over the place. Which brings us right up to 2024 and a huge new study that was basically designed to settle this thing once and for all.
So what was all the fuss about? Well, that original 2011 study found two really interesting things. First, they said that people who called themselves conservative tended to have a larger right amygdala. That's a part of the brain that gets fired up when we're processing things like fear and threats. And second, they linked liberalism to more gray matter in a spot called the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, which helps us spot when we've made a mistake. I mean, you can totally see why this grabbed headlines, right? It's a perfect story.
But here's the thing. Before we accept any of that, we have to look at how they found it. And wow, when you put the original study next to this new 2024 one, the difference is just massive. The first study had 90 college students from the UK. The new one, we're talking 928 Dutch citizens, a much more diverse and representative group. The old study used a single question to figure out someone's politics. The new one used 4 different, much more detailed measures. The bottom line is, this new study is just bigger, better, and way more rigorous.
All right, so this brings us to the main event, this powerful new replication study. It was specifically designed to fix all the little issues with the earlier research and give this whole fascinating question the serious scientific test it really deserved.
You know, one of the smartest things this new study did was realize that politics isn't just one simple thing. Are we talking about how you label yourself? Like, do you call yourself a progressive? Or are we talking about your actual stance on, say, economic regulations? This study measured all of these things separately, which gives us a way more detailed and accurate picture of what's going on.
Okay, so the moment of truth. After all this buildup, after getting a bigger sample and using better methods, what did this new and improved study actually find when it looked for those same connections from 2011?
So here's the breakdown, that link between being conservative and having a larger amygdala. It was confirmed. That connection did pop up again in this huge new set of data. But that other link, the one between being liberal and that part of the brain called the ACC, nope, that one just vanished. It wasn't there.
But hold on. Before you go thinking this proves conservatives have fear brains, there is a huge, crucial catch. Because the word confirmed does not mean what you think it means. The effect is there, yeah, but how big is it? How much does it actually matter in the real world? That's the real story.
Okay, let's get just a little nerdy for 1 second. The statistical number they found for this link was just 0.068. Now, all you really need to know is that a correlation of 1 is a perfect lockstep relationship, and a 0 is absolutely no relationship at all. So 0.068, that is an incredibly weak, barely there statistical signal.
But forget the numbers for a second, because the researchers gave us the perfect way to picture this. They calculated what this tiny statistical link actually means in terms of physical brain space. And the average difference in the size of the amygdala between liberals and conservatives? It was about 10 cubic millimeters. That is, and I'm quoting them here, just a little bit larger than a sesame seed. A single sesame seed. That's it.
Now, the researchers also went looking for any new connections they might find. And they found a faint little signal in a totally different part of the brain, the fusiform gyrus. You can think of this area as kind of like your brain's built-in recognition expert. It helps you identify complex things like faces, words, and even different social groups. What they found was some very weak, brand new evidence that maybe, just maybe, there's a tiny link between the size of this region and a person's actual positions on social and economic issues. But I have to stress the words weak and maybe here. This is super preliminary stuff that needs a lot more research.
Okay, so let's zoom out. We've got one of the original findings that barely survived, another one that completely disappeared, and a brand new one that's super shaky. So what does all of this actually mean? What's the real takeaway?
Well, this whole story might sound like a bit of a mess, but it's actually science working perfectly. This is exactly how we make progress. It starts with an interesting, exciting idea. Then other scientists come along and design an even bigger, better study to really put it to the test. The new results help us refine what we know, adding detail and nuance, and the whole field inches forward, a little bit smarter than it was before.
So, when you boil it all down, what should you remember? First, that simple, clean idea of a red brain versus a blue brain is a massive oversimplification. It's just not that easy. Second, yeah, some tiny statistical links might exist between our brains and our beliefs, but the actual physical differences are so small, we're talking sesame seed small, that they're basically meaningless for predicting anything about anyone. And what this really proves is just how essential good science is. You have to measure things carefully, and you absolutely have to do these big follow-up studies to get past the flashy headlines and find the truth. And this all leaves us with one final, really important question. If the biological, physical differences in our brain structures are so tiny they're almost irrelevant, then where do our deep, passionate, and very real political divides actually come from? Well, this suggests the answer isn't buried in our gray matter. It's out there, in our culture, our upbringing, our experiences, and our communities. And maybe, just maybe, that's where we should be focusing our attention all along.